Good afternoon, Chicagoland. My name is Carl Lissick, and I'd like to welcome you to the Green Radio Network. During this half-hour segment, we bring you the latest news and updates on everything green. Whether you're looking to green your fleet, install solar panels, or improve the quality of life in your area, we bring it all. The Green Radio Network is underwritten by the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission and South Shore Clean Cities, of which I am the executive director. South Shore Clean Cities is a U.S. Department of Energy government-industry partnership that works to reduce foreign petroleum consumption in the transportation sector. Today, our guest is no stranger to our show and a resident of the Washington, D.C. area. His name is Mr. Ken Brown. He's the governmental affairs consultant for the Transportation Energy Partners. Ken, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Carl. It's great to be here today with you.
We're glad you're here, and tell me what's going on in Washington. I know you got a big event coming up very shortly. Tell our listeners, what is the Transportation Energy Partners?
Well, first, we're digging out of about 2.5 feet of snow. So
wow.
It's an interesting time. I know your folks in the Midwest are used to that, but here in Washington, when there's about 2 inches on the ground, there's a little bit of panic in the air.
Sure, there is.
We have some challenges, but we're doing all right. We're digging out and getting ready for the upcoming Energy Independence Summit. It's going to take place on February 7th through 10th in Washington, D.C. You may recall from last year, and your listeners may remember that this is an event that brings together the Clean Cities coalitions from all across the country, as well as leaders in the clean transportation industry like Nissan and Growth Energy and Volvo and Cummins Westport, the National Propane Gas Association, and many more.
Sure.
Our mission, as is yours with Clean Cities, is to promote the use of alternative fuels and vehicles across the country, and in particular, we are very focused on making sure that federal policies and programs are in place that will help provide incentives and assistance to communities and companies that want to use alternative fuels and vehicles.
Well, Ken, that sounds like a pretty big responsibility, and I know that this is not our first rodeo at this event. How many years has this event been going on?
Probably about, I would say, at least 10 years. Mm-hmm. I've been involved for the last 6 or 7 years, and it started a few years before I got involved. So this is an annual event. It's a lot of fun, and it brings people together to network, learn from each other. A lot of new partnerships are developed and deals are done. And in addition, we pride ourselves on using this event to make an impact with our federal policymakers in the Congress, the White House, and the various federal agencies who we'll be meeting with and interacting with during the summit.
Sounds, again, I've been associated with this group for a long time, and it's a great event. But what would you say to a potential listener, an organization that potentially might want to come to this event? What are some of the opportunities for them to come?
Well, I think the big thing is it's an opportunity for folks to meet and network with the key leaders in the clean transportation industry and the key federal policymakers that have an influence on this industry. So I'm talking about industry leaders, I'm talking about Clean Cities leaders, I'm talking about leaders from the U.S. Department of Energy, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Agriculture, Department of Transportation, Department of Defense, as well as key members of Congress and their staff. The second thing I would say is this event makes a big difference in impacting federal policies and incentives to help out the alternative fuels industry. Mm-hmm. So we will have about 30 teams of individuals participating in our summit out on Capitol Hill, meeting with about 250 congressional offices on Tuesday, February 9th. And those meetings and our efforts to really educate decision makers about what's going on out in the country in terms of advances in alternative fuels really makes a difference. And to give you an example of that, we've had a lot of federal policy victories over the past year. We've increased federal funding for two important clean transportation programs. One is the EPA diesel emission grants. The program was increased from $30 million a year to $50 million a year. So those are funds that go back into communities to help companies replace old diesel vehicles that are dirty with newer alternatives. Number one, and then we also increased funding for the Department of Energy's Clean Cities program. So there will be additional dollars there as well to help fund important projects around the country.
Kim,
in addition, we were successful, along with our industry partners, in extending the federal tax incentives for alternative fuels and infrastructure through the end of 2016, and so that was important. And there's a new transportation law signed into law by the president this past fall, which, amongst other things, will start a new program to identify and develop alternative fuels corridors around the country, where infrastructure will be set up to, electric charging stations, natural gas, propane, and ethanol service stations, so that we have the infrastructure in place for folks who want to drive these newer vehicles.
That sounds very interesting, Ken. It sounds like it's going to be a jam-packed session, a lot of activities, but the Transportation Energy Partnership, it doesn't end at these events, correct? I mean, it goes on annually. It goes on throughout the year, correspondence throughout the country. Again, some of the efforts of all the Clean Cities coalitions, I think a lot of times people don't realize the value of working with their local Clean Cities coalition, working with the Transportation Energy Partnerships to talk about some of the things. And, as we talk about the price of gasoline and fuels, the price of a barrel of oil, how has that affected our economy?
Well, I think it's affecting the economy in a number of ways, at least in the short term, probably both good and bad. Obviously, it helps consumers to have lower energy prices, but it also seems to have had an impact on both, the worldwide economy in China and elsewhere. And it's also, I believe, having an impact on the acceleration of newer fuels and technologies like electric vehicles, like natural gas vehicles that are competing with traditional gasoline. So that's in the short term. I think in the long run, the price of oil and gasoline is going to remain extremely volatile. Most experts are predicting that it's going to go back up. But during this time period, it's important to maintain incentives and investments in alternatives. And so that's one of the things that we work on year-round, and we'll be talking about at the upcoming Energy Independence Summit.
Sure. So if a company, organization, an individual would like to come, how could they sign up for this event, Ken?
So the best way to do it is to go to our website, which is www.transportationenergypartners with an S .org. Again, that's www.transportationenergypartners.org. So go to the website. There's lots of information on the event, the program, how to register. If folks are interested in sponsoring, they can do that. We got a great list of industry sponsors, companies like UPS, Volvo, Nissan, Cummins Westport, Growth Energy, Go E3, Idle Air, Alltech Industries, Quasar Energy Group, and many more are all partners and sponsors in the event. So if you're an industry leader, you should be in Washington for the Energy Independence Summit.
And then they can be involved with potentially going on to the Hill to meet with local congressional leaders to talk about some of the jobs and opportunities that are going on in their specific areas of concern. Again, I think it's just been a very, it's a thought-provoking event. Very, in regards to industry standards, I think it's a very inexpensive event, Ken, that really shows a lot of value to the people that actually participate. So, we've seen different individuals that potentially are interested in the future of new technologies and things coming to these events. So, again, we would welcome folks to come and learn about all the great projects that are going through not only the Clean Cities projects, but also through Transportation Energy Partners. Ken, what do you think are some of the trends that we're going to see for 2016 moving forward?
Well, I think one of the big things, obviously, at least from the Washington D.C. perspective, the inside the Beltway perspective, that also impacts people outside the Beltway, is obviously this is a big presidential election year. Mm-hmm. So the candidates will be talking about energy issues and climate change and the environment and the economy. So that clearly is going to impact things. And then once the election happens, we're going to have a big transition here in Washington. So it will be very important for groups like ours and all the Clean Cities coalitions and our many allies in the industry to reach out and educate the new administration. So we'll be working with their transition team on energy issues, educating them about our organization and our many allies and the kinds of things we think are important for a new administration to support. Other things is we will again be working on, making sure that the federal tax incentives are extended beyond the end of 2016. Mm-hmm. We're hoping that we can educate and persuade the Congress of the value of having a longer-term extension of these incentives, at least 5 years. For the past several years, Congress has been extending them for a year at a time, and that's very difficult for the industry to plan and take advantage of those incentives. So that's another major thing that we'll be working on, as well as focusing on the implementation of projects using the increased funding that we've helped secure during the past year.
So a lot of the questions that we get on a daily basis, Ken, is have you seen the decrease in the purchase of alternative fuels since the price of gas has been so low? How would you respond to that, to one of our listeners?
I have not seen data, mm-hmm. So I really actually wouldn't even want to comment specifically on that. You certainly hear anecdotally from some companies that it's that they're worried about it. On the other hand, other companies and industries seem to be plowing forward. So, if Carl, I'd actually ask you, you're on the ground out in the Midwest, if you have any, based on your experience, what you would add to that. I will say in the long term, gas prices are going to continue to be volatile, and it is critical, absolutely critical, to maintain investments and momentum.
Well, I would totally agree with that, Ken. And I think, some of the things that we've seen in regards to steel production, to alternative fuel implementation of a lot of corporations, that, it's creating jobs, it's creating a different environment, improving the quality of life throughout, the United States. And so what we're trying to really work with, this is really an environmental return on investment types of thing. And, the business cases still make sense for organizations to use some of this technology. And a lot of this technology is once people have the opportunity to utilize the technology, they say, oh my gosh, I didn't know how efficient these vehicles were, how much they're not that much different than conventional diesel or gasoline vehicles. And so we're still, using that as our plug for alternative fuels. And we still think that, there's a lot of environmentally conscious people that are looking at better ways of, air quality improvement. And again, I think you're going to be hearing a lot more about climate change and diesel emission reductions across many of our major metropolitan areas across the country.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's that one of the most important things is just to expose people to the new technologies and the new kinds of vehicles, that once they see that they operate efficiently, safely, use cleaner fuels, more and more people will continue to purchase them, and we'll move down that road.
Sure.
Number one. And number two, I think there's no question that as a society, number one, we're not going to have oil forever. Number two, it just, to me, it seems to make total sense that we ought to be shifting away from a fuel like traditional petroleum and gasoline, which number one, we have to import so much of it from outside of the country, particularly from places in the Middle East. So there are national security implications. I think our country will be much safer, both economically and from a national security position, if we stop using so much oil and are less dependent on the Middle East. Number two, by using domestic fuels, whether it's electricity, propane, natural gas, biofuels produced in this country, we're creating jobs right here at home rather than sending our hard-earned money to the Middle East and letting them reap the benefits. And thirdly, these fuels are so much cleaner. They're so much better for the environment. We've done so much damage to the air over the years with traditional petroleum-based fuels that, to me, it just makes so much sense to move to cleaner options.
Sure. Well, Ken, keep up that great work. Any closing thoughts for our listeners as we come to the end of our program?
No, just great to be with you, Carl. Again, go to www.transportationenergypartners.org to register for the upcoming Energy Independence Summit and learn more about what you can do to promote alternative fuels and vehicles, and get involved in your local Clean Cities Coalition. I can't stress enough how valuable the local Clean Cities Coalitions are, the important work that they're doing to spread the word, to build new infrastructure, to help fleets learn about and purchase vehicles. So I commend you, Carl, for the work that you're doing, as well as your many colleagues in the Clean Cities Coalitions all around the country. Keep up the great work.
And that will do it today for today's edition of the Green Radio Network. I'm your host, Carl Lissick. Thanks again to our guest, Mr. Ken Brown. And if you'd like to find out more information about upcoming shows, please see southshorecleancities.org. And we will see you again on the upcoming Green Radio Network, a green network for a greener tomorrow.